Hi, and welcome to this DW Business Special. I'm Chris Colber in Berlin. BRICS is a thing of the past. BRICS Plus is the future. The current five-member group of emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, agreed to welcome additional nations to the bloc starting next year. Joining me to discuss the future setup of BRICS Plus, as well as its goals and agenda, is Alicia Garcia-Herrero. She's the chief economist for Asia Pacific at French investment bank Natixis. Welcome back to the show, Alicia. We'll take a look at which countries exactly are to join the bloc in a moment. First, what do you make of the general idea of the BRICS bloc wanting to expand?
Well, it all depends on the objective of the BRICS Plus. The plus means, as we Europeans know very well, much harder to get a cohesive group to work together. And however, it also means that you have a larger market to operate. So if your objective, as the BRICS group has claimed, is to create a single currency, this is not a good idea. However, and frankly speaking, if we bar that objective, which doesn't seem very credible, and we focus on the market, then this is a very good idea because we're putting together very complementary regions. Basically, what we are getting on board, or the bulk of it, is the Middle East. And this is very complementary to India, very complementary to China. So in that regard, it's good for the BRICS. There's no doubt about it.
All right, so let's take a closer look at those countries that will be joining the current BRICS nations of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The new additions are Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Alicia, Saudi Arabia and Iran, I mean, they have vast natural resources. What do the others bring to the table that is so appealing to the current BRICS members for them to welcome them into the group?
Well, UAE comes with a pack, yeah? UAE comes with Saudi, and that's basically a no-brainer that it brings a lot because you have basically two financial centers, mainly Dubai, but also Abu Dhabi to a lesser extent. This is a great addition, also because the UAE is among the very first countries, with Hong Kong and Thailand having agreed to a memorandum of understanding on the e-currency, on the Chinese e-currency, the e-RMB. So in a way, it's very nice to have this country. For the others, don't ask me. I wouldn't be able to respond other than probably a very fast adoption of RMB because they need funding. Think about the situation of Egypt, let alone Argentina. So that's more of a need part of the story. Can these countries be saved, if I may say, by China and its currency, and maybe, overall by the new development bank, which is the BRICS Development Bank? That would be a signal for others that it makes sense to be in this group. So this is a different constituencies. On the one hand, the rich; on the other hand, or the basically the resource-oriented countries, as opposed to those needing to be supported financially. This is very, very different.
Alicia, is there something like a binding feature among them? Could it be anti-Westernism, anti-Americanism?
Well, if you wanted to get more anti-Western countries, of course, Iran would be one, but you could have had North Korea. Maybe nobody dare put North Korea in the group. But I think what really unites them is, in the case of UAE, Iran, and Saudi, I think it's basically the idea that the world has tilted towards the East, and in particular China, and they want to be best placed than any other to jump on that boat. And they're thinking China will be the largest importer of energy. And by the way, if it isn't China, it will be India, which is already in the BRICS. So, I think they're better for this new world. The others simply need funding. And whoever gives them the funding will be there. And I'm sure they'll do better with the BRICS than probably with the IMF. At least that's the experience of Argentina. So I think that's a different bet, basically, depending on who you talk to.
China's state and party leader Xi Jinping says the expansion will bring new vigor to the BRICS cooperation mechanism. Do you agree? I mean, after all, the group will have 11 members then, and that potentially could make it much more difficult reaching a consensus.
What I think this BRICS Plus bring is more power to Xi Jinping. Let me explain what I mean. At the current juncture, the New Development Bank, based in Shanghai, has equal capital between India and China. And until very recently, the chairman was an Indian citizen. So if you think
Alicia,
about
just a second. The New Development Bank being the development bank of the BRICS countries. I think we need to make that clear.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So what this is bringing is countries that are much more dependent, Argentina, on China, than they are on India. So the balance, which is already, of course, tilted in favor of China, but I mean, it tilts even further. And I think this is what China is trying to achieve, a hub and spoke approach, where India is less important within the BRICS. And I think this is why, if you listen to the reports about the summit, you probably have seen the dynamics between Modi and Xi as not very easy dynamics, I would say.
I mean, they rarely see eye to eye politically, India and China. They're big political rivals. So you say the division of power among this 11-member group, this future 11-member group, will go even further towards Beijing.
That's right. That's right. Because now, at the current juncture, India is in a way better balanced because its weight out of these 5 members is bigger. But the minute you expand that, especially if you take countries, say Egypt, you know, very dependent on funding from China, Argentina, then the balance is just further tilted towards China. That's exactly what I want to say.
I talked to Jim O'Neill recently. He coined the acronym BRIC back in 2001 when he was working as an economist at Goldman Sachs. And he says these evolving economies trying to form a bloc with political sway has largely been kept to symbolism.
I think it defaults to this really powerful symbolism, which on the one level is really powerful, but at the same time, what does it really mean? And when you look at what they've tried to achieve collectively since they first talked about getting together in 2009, it's been very little, in my view.
Alicia, back to you. I mean, we know that the economies of China and India have surged. They're big economies. China is the second largest economy of the world. But then again, there are these political differences. What impact has BRICS as a group been having?
Well, I would talk about 2 phases here. Phase 1 is the creation of BRICS and China immediately understanding that it can go on its own. It can go solo, hub and spoke, against the rest of the emerging world, creating the Belt and Road Initiative. And China forgets about the BRICS, in my humble opinion, because it just doesn't see the advantage of sharing power. In fact, if you look at the capital of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, compared to the New Development Bank, you can clearly see that China was betting for BRI-related lending. But that hasn't worked as positively as probably China thought, first because a lot of that lending has gone bust, and secondly, because the sentiment against China, or more negative about China, has only increased in these economies. So I think China is saying, okay, let's try back to BRICS. This also gives a better position to Russia, and because it's more primus inter pares compared to the Belt and Road Initiative. And I think it helps China kind of recreate a larger group where Russia will be very supportive of China, but on a more equal weight. So it's like a second attempt, and I think this attempt is going to be much more forceful because the Belt and Road Initiative is basically not working out for China. So this is why.
Do you see then when this group is set to grow and when the objective is to sort of change the global order and tilt it more towards countries that feel that things haven't been going their way, do you see then more cooperation on geopolitical issues, for example, shared access to important minerals?
The elephant in the room is India. Why would China share if India's position in this geopolitical battle in the US-China strategic competition is not clear yet? I think India wants to play what I call the little China. The global south is also India's global south. So I think China is very reluctant to share for a country that is trying to shadow China. And therefore, I think the cooperation will, at the very end, not be so effective. I quite agree with Jim O'Neill that, notwithstanding the second attempt, if you ask me, it might not be so effective cooperation-wise, but narrative-wise, surely more than the Belt and Road Initiative. That's why I think China is most.
At the same time, we have the United States and the UK grooming India when it comes to political decisions. What do you make of that in light of this group expanding, China trying to have even more power?
Well, that is exactly India's leverage. And by the way, we are also grooming India with our negotiations for free trade agreements. So it's the US, it's the UK, and it's us. Let's not forget. And why does India have all of these interested parties? Exactly because it's the tilting balance. It's the economy that is big enough to tilt the balance one way or the other. And this is why India is ready to play the China game, i.e. the BRICS, if it can benefit from that, even Shanghai Cooperation Organization, even, quasi-security type, or even not even quasi-security type organizations, and at the same time the Quad, and negotiate trade and investment deals with all of us. And only India can do that. China knows that. Thus, China will not cooperate. It's too dangerous for China.
Let's talk about Russia here for a second. You already said that within this new setup of this BRICS Plus group, it would possibly be further aligned and even stronger aligned with China. Now, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says that the BRICS group plans to set up an alternative payment system. Is that likely to happen?
We already have a couple, actually, so they only need to choose which one they want to push further. The most obvious one would be the CIPS, Chinese International Payment System. The Russians have their own. It's, of course, much smaller. The CIPS has grown, especially since Russia invaded Ukraine and, payments were diverted, especially RMB payments, into CIPS. They could groom that further, but there's no reason why, say, India would support that, because that's a China-centric payment system with a lot of data that China one day could use against India, leverage against India. So I don't think it's going to be so easy. And the link between Russia and China payments-wise is already there. We don't need to come up with any new payments system to do that. Therefore, I think it won't be so easy. Russia needs it desperately, but that doesn't mean that India does. And India is a bigger force here.
We spoke to our China correspondent, James Chater, who told us that the expansion of BRICS is a way for China to keep other countries within its economic orbit. Let's take a listen here.
move to de-risk supply chains away from China, as Western nations often describe it, is certainly going to be adding to fears that Beijing has over the direction of its economy. Of course, we have US-led restrictions on investment in really critical areas like advanced semiconductors that are really, really hurting the heart of the Chinese economy. And elsewhere, we've seen in Germany, for example, Germany expressing a desire to implement tighter foreign investment controls as it warns of an over-reliance on Beijing. All of that is really not helpful to a country where exports are already falling, domestic demand is low. And now it's really important to point out that China says that it's been kind of opposed to these ideas. And we have the EU unveiling a new anti-economic coercion instrument this year, which many thinking China could be a eventual target of. But I think, you know, even if China wasn't facing these current issues with the economy, it would still be likely to be making this case at the BRICS summit because it views what it sees these countries as wanting to decouple from China as an attempt to limit the growth of its economic power.
Alicia, back to you. Do you agree with our correspondent there?
Yes, I agree that China is trying to use BRICS as a new breakthrough to change the global order faster. And the other tools are much less concrete because, and when I say tools, I mean the Global Development Initiative, the Global Civilization Initiative, the Global Security Initiative. Many initiatives, but no substance. But with the BRICS, I think they can basically steer that a change in the global order more effectively. I don't mean to say, and I said that before, very effectively, by all means and purposes, but more than with these global narratives that are useful to shape UN decisions, UN mantras, and therefore still trying to change the global order, but it's on the narrative level. It's not on the action level. BRICS is about the action level. Whether they will actually manage is a different question.
If it is the goal of the BRICS and the BRICS Plus in the future to change the world order, to give certain countries, certain parts of the world more political weight, what are the biggest challenges on that way now that the group consists of 11 countries, which is trying to do something that the group consisting of 5 countries in the past often failed to achieve?
I mean, I agree that it is even harder with 11 countries than with 5 countries, and there's no doubt about it. But we need to realize 2 things here. First of all, I don't think China was pushing the BRICS before. China was sleeping on the BRICS. It was a concept that China was not happy to use. The other very important issue is that China is more desperate, quote unquote, than it was before, because before I think China thought it has the whole, I mean, all of the time needed to basically take the baton of the global order. But because the Chinese economy is decelerating structurally, and I think by now, no matter the propaganda, China knows this in and out, and its leaders, the window, the time window is shrinking. And China needs to go back to BRICS to say, okay, I need to do this faster than I thought. My resources are less than I thought. So I need to make a push here. This is the easiest concept I have that is actually operational. I agree that 11 is less operational, but without a BRICS Plus, as you said at the beginning, everybody would have thought is more of the same thing. So I think they had to give this signal, and I guess they just took on board the countries that were ready to sign. It doesn't mean they were the best countries. They were the countries that were ready to sign. And I finish by saying, and this is very important, Chris, that I myself would say, I laugh, sorry to say, at the idea of this group creating a single currency. We Europeans know how hard it is. But I should stop laughing as we speak at the fact that this is not important for us to watch, we in the West. Because Iran and Saudi together can have enormous consequences for, at the end of the day, energy prices before we actually manage to finalize our transition. It's kind of the window of opportunity, if you see what I mean. And this is, and plus Russia, plus UAE. I mean,
so it does give them.
Who knows? Maybe
it does give them sway. It does give them sway then.
On the commodity markets, on the energy markets in particular, yes, it does. So we cannot just say, okay, they won't manage to do this and that. It depends on what they want to do. Maybe in a way, they are forcing us to think of a currency that they will never create, and at the same time, they're getting hold of the oil market in terms of their ability to steer prices, and that's what will hurt us. So we might not need to listen to the mantras and the narratives, but just check out the group at what they can do if the objective is to change the global order. That's what we should be doing. This is a mahjong game at the end of the day.
Alicia, we live in times when, unfortunately, many of us are forced to choose sides. And you know, with this being a multipolar world, or something that Beijing and Russia are pushing for, a multipolar world, how is the West supposed to position itself vis-a-vis this growing BRICS bloc?
Yeah. Well, first, not believing that China was a multipolar world. It was a basically unipolar world. I mean, otherwise we would be seeing a very different relation between India and China. The country that really wants a multipolar world is India, because otherwise India will have to, you know, a country of that size individually will need to basically kneel, quote unquote, either on China's side or the US. And that's something India is not ready to do. So if there is somebody we should be, quote unquote, following, I'm talking about Europe now, understanding better how they're pushing this multipolar world, that's India. That's what we should be watching, and we should be supporting India. And I, frankly, and I'm going to end by ranting a little bit, we should not be focusing on the trees rather than the forest, as to whether, you know, emissions here and there for a free trade deal. Yeah, all of that is very good, but we can't miss the train of cooperating with India, because that's, again, the solution to creating a multipolar world where Europe will also have its stake.
Alicia, Brazil's President Lula da Silva claims BRICS does not want to be a counterweight to the G7. How credible is that?
Well, we just need to listen to what Lula said while he was in Beijing to realize that this is probably something Lula is saying maybe after a call from Washington. What are you doing at the BRICS? You know, it sounds like a counter narrative to avoid problems. At the end of the day, Brazil sits in the Western Hemisphere. Let's not forget. It's the one and only country there that sits in the Western Hemisphere. So I can understand Lula has to be careful. But I don't think that is in line with, he knows very well that that's not in line with what is intended here. It is obviously a counterweight to the G7, no doubt about it.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that global governance structures at the UN, the UN Security Council, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank reflect, quote, yesterday's world. Alicia, as a final question, will this expansion to 11 countries help the BRICS bloc to be a quote-unquote champion for the global south, help tilt the needle towards countries who feel institutions and organizations are not working in their favor?
Well, I think the global south has a point on our Bretton Woods type institutions. And I think we've been too slow to understand. And I think we Europeans should we should realize that we've been trying to keep our quotas and not even realizing that we were already a Eurozone and that we could have worked together. I mean, there's a lot to be blamed about this. But I actually think that it's no longer a question of reforming Bretton Woods institutions, because if you think about the UN itself, China already has a lot of power in the UN. It heads many committees. It basically sets a good part of the agenda. But still, China does not seem to be satisfied. So, you know, I don't think we are going to be able to fix this in following Lula's comments. I think it's more about alternative solutions, because China knows that the U.S. containment will continue. So there's no longer a way for China to operate in the existing institutions as it wishes. And therefore, I think that the call really is, again, new institutions. Strengthen the New Development Bank, maybe not exit the existing ones, continue to put pressure on them, but not necessarily in a constructive way.
Alicia Garcia-Herrero, Asia Pacific Chief Economist at Natixis. Thank you very much for your insights, Alicia. And a big thanks to you for watching. Be sure to tell us what you think in the comments, and check out more of our stuff in the business section of the DW News YouTube channel. I'm Chris Colbert in Berlin. Take care and see you soon.